Very much, and I thank the commissioners. My concern that I want to address is decommissioning. In Vermont, Vermont Yankee, located in southern Vermont, right on the Massachusetts and New Hampshire border, was one of the first, I think the first merchant plant to be decommissioned. So we're sort of at the tip of the spear addressing the combination of issues between the industry that has to shut that down and the local and state communities that want to have a say in the process. And over the course of the last couple of years, Senator Sanders and Senator Leahy and I, on behalf of Vermonters, have been raising some questions that we want included in rulemaking. One, the lack of state and local stakeholder involvement in the decommissioning process is a concern. Two, the questionable uses of the decommissioning trust fund, such as for spent fuel management, is a recurring issue at the Vernon plant. Three, the reality that the use of safe store decommissioning procedure will effectively delay the cleanup and the redevelopment of the nuclear site for decades is a big issue for us. We'd like to put that place back into operation sooner rather than later. And then four, the reduction of emergency planning functions during periods when spent fuel remains are in spent fuel pools. That's an ongoing concern. That's an issue for us in Vermont, but as more and more plants are going offline, that's going to be an issue for them as well. And the questions that I wanted to start asking about were on the rulemaking process. And in the initial phases of this, it appeared that the NRC, in fact, was paying attention to many of those concerns that I just cited. But there's been a tug of war in the process, and the industry concerns appear to me, and I think to Senator Leahy and Senator Sanders, to be paramount. They want flexibility on some of the safety issues, but they really are resistant to the four issues that I mentioned. So that's a real concern to us, and not just to us, because this, as I mentioned, is going to be relevant for all these other plants that are going to get decommissioned. So I'll start, Madam Chair, with you, if you would. Do you believe that state and local stakeholder concerns should be considered on equal footing with those of the industry, and believe that a final decommissioning rule that codifies regulatory and safety exemptions that industry has requested, but don't address concerns over the use of the decommissioning trust fund, the local input in the post-shutdown rules, would be problematic? We'd like both included.
Congressman, thank you for this question, and you and the people you represent have been very, very active in the rulemaking process. The stage we are at right now is that the NRC staff has developed a regulatory basis, and they will begin the process of developing a proposed rule to come before our commission. My approach as a member of the commission is to look at the totality of the public comment record, and I don't look at who sent the comment. I look at the underlying matter that the comment is raising, and I look to make sure that the agency is responsive to that comment. So I don't want to prejudge where I would be on a proposed rule that hasn't come before me yet, but as part of my review, I will certainly look at that comment
I understand
record.
You can't prejudge it, but we really want some assurance that the local concerns will have a seat at the table. That's really the bottom line of what we want. And there's a tug of war because the industry concerns are sometimes different. They want to get out sooner rather than later. And the local community wants that property back in service and obviously concerned about the decommissioning fund. Mr. Barron, can you tell me what opportunities state and local stakeholders will have over the coming year to weigh in on the decommissioning rulemaking?
Sure. Well, the main opportunity, there have been two periods of public comment to date, and as the chairman mentioned, we got a couple hundred comments. I looked at them all, and you're right. States and local governments are very engaged on this issue. They want to be heard. The next big opportunity will be when the proposed rule is prepared. The commission will vote on a proposed rule, and that'll go out for public comment. Right. And that'll be the first time that stakeholders have an opportunity to look at what is it that the agency is proposing to do and what is their reaction to that.
All right, and thank you. And Mr. Burns, thanks for your work over the years. This basic request that our communities have to be at the table as a full and equal partner?
I'd agree with what my colleagues have said. I think as the proposed rulemaking comes before us, one of the things I'm going to look at is some of those process issues, as well as the substantive issues about what does safety demand, and assuring that we have clarity on things like the decommissioning trust funds. It's interesting. We had a good meeting, I think, about a year or two ago. We had one of the representatives from the Citizens Advisory Committee from Vermont was there, and heard her there. Some of these things, I think, will be regulatory solutions. Some of them are going to be the interactions within the states themselves. But I do think it's important that the voices are all heard.
Gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Johnson, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank